Welcome to the Energy Conversations podcast, your go-to source for unpacking the complexities of the South African energy sector. My name is Thokozile Zambani. I will be your guide, and every 2 weeks, we will be on a journey of bridging the knowledge gap surrounding South Africa's energy sector and the transition to a low-carbon economy. Welcome back to the Energy Conversations podcast, where we break down the complexities of the South African energy sector into digestible insights and explore pivotal topics shaping the future of energy in South Africa and beyond. I am your host, Thokozile Zambani, and in today's episode, we will be diving into a crucial topic that is critical to the success of South Africa's energy transition, namely skills development. Joining us today are four incredible leaders who are actively shaping the future of skills development in the South African energy sector. I am joined by Yershen Pillay, who is the CEO of CHIETA, Amanda Dzivhani, who is the COO of Green Solar Academy, Bertha Dlamini, the founding president of AWEaP, and Wendy Poulton, who is the director at Strategic Mindset. They will be sharing their insights on the challenges, the initiatives, and the opportunities available to support our workforce to ensure a sustainable energy future for South Africans. So stay tuned in today's episode as we unpack strategies and stories behind building the skills that will power tomorrow's energy landscape today. To kick off today's episode, I'd like to start with some brief introductions from all of our guests. I'd like to just take this moment to ask each of our guests to just introduce themselves briefly, sharing a bit about their current role in the energy sector, perhaps sharing about the organization that they are representing, and then we'll then dig straight into the questions. Yershen, if I can start with you, please. If you can maybe just introduce yourself, share what your current role is in the energy sector, and a bit about your organization.
Thank you, Thokozile, and thank you once again for this opportunity and this excellent podcast on energy conversations. My name is Yershen Pillay. I'm the CEO of the Chemical Industries Education and Training Authority, often referred to as CHIETA. CHIETA has the responsibility of facilitating skills development and training interventions through discretionary grants and other form of support. And some of it, in terms of the scope of our work, actually overlaps into areas of the energy sector. This includes oil, gas, and the green hydrogen subsectors, which constitute an integral part of South Africa's energy sector. I'm currently an advisory board member of the African Energy Leadership Center at the Wits Business School.
Amanda, if I can hand over to you, please could you briefly introduce yourself and just share about your current role in the South African energy sector and a bit more about your organization.
Okay, thank you, Thokozile, and thank you for letting me be part of this crucial conversation. My name is Amanda Dzivhani, and I'm the COO for Green Solar Academy. And what we do at Green Solar Academy is we are a training academy which specializes solely on solar training. So we train professional courses, and we are also SAPVIA endorsed. So our training and assessment centers have the stamp from SAPVIA. And we've also been involved in some projects that included youth training, which I think we'll speak to a bit later. But yes, that's me in a nutshell.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Amanda. Bertha, if I could ask you to briefly introduce yourself, your current role in the energy sector, and a bit more about your organization, please.
Sure. My name is Bertha Dlamini. I am the founding president of African Women in Energy and Power. We're a nonprofit company dedicated to accelerating and supporting the participation of women, youth, and persons with disability across the vast value chains of energy generation, transmission, and distribution. We've got 22 chapters on the continent represented by individual entrepreneurs and energy professionals that drive our programs that support the participation of women, youth, and persons with disability in the energy space. We also deliver skills development programs, mainly focusing on the just energy transition to unravel value chains and to identify entry points that present the lowest barriers to entry for emerging entrepreneurs to consider and to organize themselves to participate.
Wow, it's a mouthful. Looking forward to hearing more about the work that AWEaP does. And lastly, I'd like to ask Wendy if she can just briefly introduce herself, share about her current role in the energy sector.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today. I am currently a director of my own company called Strategic Mindsets. I worked for Eskom for 32 years, and so have been heavily involved in the energy sector in my career. The kind of work that I do now is consulting around climate change, sustainability, strategy and risk, and also I'm involved and on the board of the South African National Energy Association and a member of the BRICS Business Council Energy, Green Economy and Climate Change Working Group. So I do work in the energy sector, but not exclusively to the energy sector, but primarily in the energy sector.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Wendy. And I'd like us to now dig in and really get straight into the topic and into exploring a bit more around the different role players that are involved in skills development in the energy sector. And I think in this round of questions, I think what would be really important is just to get an understanding of the current skills gap that's facing us, and a better understanding of what the industry needs are. And I'd like to kick off, Yershen, with you, and specifically around the work that CHIETA does. So how is CHIETA working to identify the most critical skills gaps in South Africa's energy sector, and especially considering rapid growth of emerging technologies such as renewable energy and digitization?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Thokozile. Look, a few years ago, CHIETA funded the establishment of the African Energy Leadership Center at the Wits Business School. This center has made significant strides in terms of identifying skills gaps in the energy sector. We have for years now been investing into what we value, and one of the things that we do value is closing the skills gaps in both the chemical sector in particular, but broadly in terms of the petrochemicals and diversified energy sector. Our focus really has been on closing the skills gaps in oil, gas, and the green hydrogen subsectors. Now, our approach really in the energy sector is a stakeholder-centric approach. We have been working closely with most of our industry partners through collaborative agreements that we've signed with our petrochemicals and diversified energy companies, such as Sasol, BP, and Afrox, to name but a few, but as well as an increasing number of green hydrogen companies, which have been joining CHIETA, given the broad scope of our work. So it's through this close collaboration with industry that we've been able to develop well-informed sector skills plans and your sector-specific strategies for skills development and training. As you mentioned, we cannot deny the fact that the reality that we find ourselves in is a digital-first world, and the energy sector is rapidly digitizing. In fact, data from our recent CHIETA research report indicates that the top 5 new and emerging occupations in the oil and gas sector are all digital related. This includes an increasing demand for information security specialists, data scientists, data engineers, data analysts. Companies such as PetroSA have indicated almost 1,000 or so data analysts being in high demand in their particular instance. But you also see, digital transformation specialists, big data specialists, and various other digital-related qualifications. So with this massive opportunity in terms of the rapid digitization of the energy sector, we need to get more unemployed youth especially interested in these new and emerging occupations, to seize these future job opportunities. The challenge we face is we have about 3.1 million youth who are not in employment, education, and training. Sorry, it's 3.4 million, but for the last decade or so, it has been hovering between 3.1 and 3.4 million. So the picture has not changed at all. Yet we've got this increasing demand for digital-related job opportunities in the energy sector. So we are presented with this massive opportunity, and this is not unique to the South African context. Just recently, we've seen the government of Mauritania in North Africa signing an agreement with the data analytics company TGS, which is now PGS, to acquire data and predictive analytics for accelerating the gas exploration across the offshore and onshore basins. So this is something that presents a massive opportunity. And what we've been doing is actually using our discretionary grants to fund the skills development and training interventions in these specific trades that I've mentioned.
Thank you very much for that, Yershen. Really some interesting and exciting work that you're doing, obviously, and taking into account where we are from a digitization perspective, that it is really a huge opportunity. It's a chance then as a young person or anybody who's looking to grow in this space to take up those opportunities. So to perhaps go and visit the CHIETA website and have a look at, you know, what are some of the opportunities or what are some of the programs that one can participate in. It seems that, you know, it's this big bus that's moving, but it's not too late and everybody can really still get on and not be left behind. Amanda, I want to bring you into the conversation here. And you know, you're also at the coalface, so to speak, of training, and then specifically training in the solar sector. And yes, what would you say then have been the top skills or the top 3 skills that you believe are currently in highest demand for professionals that are looking to enter this field? And how is the Green Solar Academy equipping individuals to meet these needs?
All right, thank you for that question. So as Green Solar Academy, one of our unique selling point is that all our trainers are industry experts in their field. So we have people that are active in the industry, either as installers or designers or consultants. So that is how we are able to get and understand the news in the industry. And when we do research for our courses, because we have to keep on updating to make sure that it's still relevant, we've realized that now, as opposed to last year especially, the market is leaning towards commercial and industrial. And with that lean, we're realizing that there are more designers that are needed. And when we look at our portfolio, we wanted to also have something that speaks to that, because we didn't want to only train people to be on the roof. We want people to have the options in the sector as a whole. So outside of designers, I would also say that another skill that is needed is people that will be able to understand and interpret the regulations and the standards of the system, so that they know that everything that is happening is compliant. Because we would have a lot of Baki Brigade installations, and to try and keep the quality of the installations, that is how we also come in as a training academy, to make sure that we have a course that speaks to that people can come and learn and understand what are the regulations saying, what are the standards, and things like that. And I also think that another thing that is quite important is project management, especially if we're speaking to industrial installation, because it's a huge job. And as one person, you're not going to be able to do all of the things that are needed there, but just to get an overview of what is supposed to happen in a PV farm. This is what's supposed to go right. If it's happening like this, then it's going wrong, just so that people have that general overview and they know who they need on site, so that as one person, the burden doesn't fall on you, but you understand I need this person to delegate these duties to. I need such a person to delegate this to. So those are some of the things that from our side, I would say that are skills that are still needed. And we do have courses that we've developed to try and educate and equip people so that they can get those skills as they want to enter the industry.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think also when we look at the solar PV industry, we then look at beyond just the initial installations. There's that ongoing maintenance that needs to actually be in place for those solar panels. So where somebody, may not have had the technical skill of being able to design a system, but there is a low-hanging fruit or an opportunity just simply in the maintenance and ensuring that these systems continue to operate effectively. Bertha, I'd like to bring you into the conversation and really also, just focusing more or bringing the focus more on women and women's participation in the energy sector, and wanting to understand that, from the work that you've done with AWEaP, what in your perspective are the primary barriers preventing women from entering into or advancing in the energy sector? And how is AWEaP working with women or different organizations to overcome these challenges?
Thank you, Togo. One of the barriers that we have identified since we started delivering our market orientation webinars at the height of COVID-19 was a lack of information. And what I mean by lack of information is there are policy documents, there are reports and journals that are written that are very technical, not synthesized to be palatable to the entrepreneur who wants to participate in the energy space. And our role has been to simplify, to bring ecosystem players within South Africa and the continent's energy sector to speak on these policy documents, to speak on the construct of value chains in terms and in a manner that's easy to understand by any entrepreneur who might not have the engineering background but may have the business acumen and the interest to want to participate in the energy space. So first is to unravel value chains and distinguish between services, products, solutions, and systems, and identify who the off-takers are of these commodities, who are the what technologies are sought after by utilities, what technologies are sought after by independent power producers, what technologies are sought after by the commercial and industrial sector, and where as an entrepreneur can I source this technology to on-trade? Are there channel partner programs that I can enroll in and be trained on operating and maintaining a technology so that I can position myself within the market to capture the emerging opportunities through the procurement of such commodities? So we have played a pivotal role in bringing this information and packaging it and delivering it in a manner that resonates with entrepreneurs' interests. So that's one, the lack of information. Now, lack of information is also related to limited networks. Right. The energy sector is typically very male dominated. It's very technical. And so a lot of our candidates who participated on our webinars, not only from South Africa, but from the region at large, one of the questions that they had is, where do I start? All right, I am interested, I can pull in funding, I have this network, but where do I start? And so we've been able to highlight through industry experts that shared these insights where the entry points are. The other barrier is access to finance. The energy sector is capital intensive. It is quite complex. The financing instruments and models are quite complex, often requiring that entrepreneurs enlist the services of specialist consultants to model their solutions. Oftentimes, entrepreneurs don't have the resources to enlist the specialist services to build a value proposition that can be competitively presented to an off-taker. And so Access to finance is an area that we pay attention to. We invite finance institutions to present on how they finance energy projects. And this is commercial banks, development finance institutions, private equity funds, venture capitalists, and angel financiers who are now looking into Africa as a market as Africa pursues universal access to electrification and modernization of systems, as Yershen presented earlier on, the digitization of energy systems. We highlight where these entry points are and where you can access finance to participate at different funding tickets for entrepreneurs. I must say that we haven't been very successful in aligning entrepreneurs, especially first-time players, to the right funding tickets or right funding instruments. That it's a challenge that I think as an ecosystem, as an industry, we must resolve if we wish to propel the participation of youth, women, and persons with disability. Finally, one of the areas, and I'm hoping I'm not repeating myself, is tailoring market information in a manner that makes sense to entrepreneurs. So you can go to any of the universities and you can enroll on a course, or any of the colleges, you can enroll on a course. What we have been successful in doing is, what is it that an entrepreneur needs to know about the energy sector? And we have pulled entrepreneurs that have succeeded in the area to deliver content based on first-hand experience, so they can highlight where the challenges are. I was looking for finance. I made a first proposal, a presentation to a bank, a commercial bank. I was turned down so many times until I figured out that this is how it's done. And these are the kind of testimonies that we bring into our programs. Our Just Energy Transition Skills Development Programs looks at policies, looks at value chain constructs, looks at access to finance, and looks at how, as an entrepreneur, an energy entrepreneur, female energy entrepreneur, first-time player, or a young entrepreneur, first-time player, or even opportunities for persons with disability. Persons with disability are a segment in our society that often we don't pay deliberate attention to. And there aren't enough market orientation and education programs that highlight where different categories of disability can fit in these emerging opportunities within the value chains. And it is actually a travesty as a country that we are not paying a dedicated attention to include this particular segment in our society. And so we have started inviting players in the sector to say, tell us how else persons with disability can participate as value-adding service providers across value chains. So that I'm hoping that I have described a number of barriers that intersect and affect the participation of women, youth, and persons with disability in the energy space.
Thank you very much for that, Bertha. And I think what we also need to understand is that in as much as there's a barrier or there are these challenges, it's not to say that it is impossible.
Correct.
And that these barriers should in fact encourage us, and we should look at them as opportunities for us to actually ensure that we are, we're taking women along in this journey. And I love what you've also highlighted, that, the importance of reducing knowledge hurdles, because I think at the end of the day, there's a lot that's said in terms of the energy sector, that there's so much opportunity. Whether you're an SMME, a woman, a young person, you'd feel like, I should be able to be really winning it. But it's actually a very challenging sector, and I don't think we have those open and frank conversations. And the reality is that if you are trying to participate in the sector, even if you've been in the sector for years, there's still things that you need to understand or see how this would fit in. And I think, what you're speaking around is those kind of webinars, that kind of information sharing, that becomes quite important, because it's one thing to say there are so many opportunities that are available. It's another to say, look, these are the opportunities. here's a channel partnership, here is this, here's a funder. And I think the point that you've made regarding persons with disabilities is actually such a key point. It reminded me of engagements in a meeting earlier today where, you know, the conversation was around, if we're not deliberate to say that we are structuring a program, and if we are structuring a program, we'd like persons with disabilities to attend. And if we're not intentional to then go to organizations or go into communities and say, I am looking for persons with disabilities, they actually won't participate in these opportunities. Because I think when we're having conversations around inclusivity, whether it's gender, persons with disability, or whatever it is, whatever segment we're looking at, we have to operate from a perspective of people already feel marginalized. People already feel like there isn't space for them. People already attend conferences and there isn't an interpreter. Or I'm attending a conference and it requires me to climb 2 flights of stairs. Am I truly welcome? And it's then incumbent of those of us that are working in the sector, working in, involved in skills development, and that when we are structuring these things, to be mindful of, am I creating a conducive environment that somebody who perhaps has a disability or from a different gender would feel welcome enough to feel like they can participate and really play a meaningful role in that engagement. Thank you for that, Bertha. I want to just close off this round of questions and maybe just bring Wendy into the conversation and then just find out from you, Wendy, what are some of the, key skills or areas of expertise that you believe will be critical in the future energy workforce in South Africa, and how can educational institutions be better aligned with these needs? Because I think there's often a conversation that we're having around entrepreneurship, these entrepreneurial opportunities, but at the end of the day, not everybody is necessarily going to be an entrepreneur, but needs to find themselves and needs to find a space for themselves in the workforce. So Wendy, if you could maybe just give some input on that.
The work that was done under the auspices of the South African National Energy Association, funded by GIZ, was not just on renewables, but on an energy skills roadmap for South Africa. And it looked into the future using scenarios and other tools to say, what are the big technological and other trends that we think are going to happen in the energy sector in our country? And over what time period and when do we think they're going to happen? Because one of the big problems with skills provisioning is the uncertainty about the demand. And it's very difficult sometimes to judge demand for skills, given that there's so many factors that play into it, like regulation and technology uptake levels, those kinds of things. So what we did in that work was look at what are the occupations that we think are going to come out, and we identified 6 major areas or major trends, including AI, robotics and automation, climate change, both mitigation and adaptation, and then energy security is obviously a very big issue at the time and still continues to be for South Africa and other African countries, as well as issues like the energy poverty gap between the haves and the have-nots, and of energy affordability in the country, and why that is so important. And based on that, I think the major occupations that came out as no regret options that you would have to do, no matter which scenario plays out in South Africa, is that around renewable energy. Be that big scale, large grid connected solar plants or wind plants, right down to small household levels with having a solar panel on your, or panels on your roof. And those skills have been looked at quite extensively by a number of players, including NBI and various other, and WITS Real, which is our partner on doing this, which is Researching Education and Labour Centre at WITS, that specializes in looking at skills work. And so that was one of the big findings. The other one that came out in just about every scenario was gas as a transition fuel, and being really important. And energy efficiency. It always absolutely amazes me that we don't focus enough on energy efficiency given the climate change imperative, but also affordability and energy security issues. We also determined that it's not just technical skills, and we've got to be very careful in looking at energy skills development, that we don't go in very narrow, siloed approach for skills development. We looked at over 200 studies to see what has already been done on energy skills in South Africa. And most of them were very narrow technologically based ones. So they would look at only PV or only wind, or and those being the most popular. And sometimes forget about those skills like procurement skills, like project management skills for large infrastructure projects, like climate change financing skills. So we think that if you really want to implement at scale, you have to take a broader view on energy skills and get out of this mindset of it just being technologically focused. We also looked at what skills we're going to lose in or are going to be jobs at risk, and where we would need to reskill, upskill people to make sure that this transition that we're going through is just. And then lastly, we looked at areas of skills that are in nascent sectors like green hydrogen, which is very promising, but is a while off for really large-scale commercialization. So one of the issues that came out in that is, and other work that we've done subsequent to that, is to look at how you broad-base people in their skills so that they have flexibility and are able to go into different job pathways or learning pathways, depending on what happens, given that we are in such an uncertain world today.
Thank you very much for that, Wendy. I'd like to, Yershen, I'd like to bring you back into the conversation, and maybe you can just share, what are some of the key programs or initiatives that CHIETA has been implemented to support the reskilling of professionals to participate in South Africa's energy transition?
Thanks, Thokozile, again for this question. I think it's an important question, as you mentioned, that leads us to applying sort of an innovation lens to the energy question, where we shift the focus towards seizing the opportunities that are available out there. One of the things we've done is not to necessarily focus on training for the sake of training or skilling for the sake of skilling, as that might actually contribute to increasing unemployment, given that many companies don't really have the capacity to absorb those who have been skilled or trained for whatever reason. Our focus has been broader. To us, energy is a means to sustainable livelihoods. In fact, our goal has really been to say, how do we improve the quality of life? And so what we've done is, our strategy has been very multi-pronged. So on the one hand, we focus on qualifications development. We've developed 21 new occupational qualifications, many of which are related to the energy sector. So to lay the foundation for accelerated gas development, for instance, we have developed new occupational qualifications, such as that of a domestic natural gas practitioner. Secondly, we have a commercial natural gas practitioner. And then we have a qualification for industrial thermal processing gas technician, all of which contributes to growing the gas sector in the country. In terms of green hydrogen, for example, and green hydrogen is currently, a lot of buzz being created around green hydrogen as the new gold, with South Africa having a competitive advantage over many countries. We are currently in the process of developing 3 new qualifications, which will be ready by March next year. These include a green hydrogen technology practitioner, a green hydrogen production practitioner, and a green hydrogen fuel transporter. So with these new qualifications, it provides alternative paths for career development and skills development into new job opportunities. We've just allocated a grant of 1.8 million rand to SASOL for electrolysis simulators in terms of the fusion of green hydrogen with digitization, and for new green hydrogen fuel systems to be established. And this is how we're contributing to the green hydrogen economy as CHIETA. On the other hand, we have innovative programs that support entrepreneurs in the energy sector. So we have a 10 million Rand program for entrepreneurs over 40. We've realized that there's quite a few programs, although not enough, for youth, which are those individuals below the age of 35 in terms of the universal definition. But what we often find is that people over the age of 35, having failed a number of times, now have the experience, the know-how, the qualifications, the skills to actually set up more sustainable enterprises, but lack the type of access to funding opportunities and non-financial support that they would have had they been under the age of 35. So we've set up this fund for entrepreneurs over 40. It's 10 million, but what we've realized as well is that due to limited funding, often there's a frustration out there that there's not enough funding for entrepreneurs, rightfully so. But all that we can do in our various organizations is make our contribution. And so yes, it's limited, but there is a fund, and this is important. We've recently established a 12 million Rand artisan entrepreneurship program where we hope to support artisans such as electricians to start and sustain their own small businesses. Our target is to support 100 artisan entrepreneurs by 2025. And then we've also established a Lesedi student debt fund for those students who have student debt to obtain their certificates and enter the labor market. Overall, we've disbursed about 61.7 million Rand worth of discretionary grants to petrochemical and energy companies for the training of electrical engineers, chemical engineers, mechanical engineers, etc. And energy companies who are members of CHIETA can certainly apply for these training grants. So I think just in conclusion, these are some of the opportunities. I think what is often the frustration, as I mentioned, is that it's simply not enough given the demand that's out there. And maybe Thokozile, just to give you a sense of what that demand looks like. In our recent grant cycle, we had about 21 billion Rand worth of applications for 472 million Rand worth of grants. So as you can imagine, even if we chose the best of the best, you would still have a lot of valid grant applications that would have been very unhappy at the fact that they did not receive grants from CHIETA. And it's only because we simply do not have the kind of resources to meet that demand out there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Yershen. And actually, very encouraging what you're speaking about programs for people over 35, because I think, and to your point, this exclusion, and I do recognize the importance of focusing on young people and opportunities for young people, but the reality is life beyond 35, and it's so often that it's only beyond 35 that you're actually in the place to be able to be conceptualizing some of these things because you've gone through certain life experiences. And I think for me, this has actually been refreshing to hear about, because it's not often that you hear of programs that recognize that, and programs that recognize that you could be 40 years old and starting a new business, but if you're certainly in a much stronger position at 40 starting a business than perhaps at 20, because you've accumulated about 20 years odd years of experience. So I think that for me is actually quite an encouraging program, and it really then speaks to the fact that there are programs out there, and there are organizations like yourself that are being proactive in terms of what are the solutions that are needed. And yes, to your point, the need is often far greater. But I think what's important is that if everybody is contributing to this need, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So maybe, the gap we have is in the billions, but with each organization, each contributing, it does go a long way. And I think what also is important, especially if we're saying we're having programs to support entrepreneurship. I mean, we recently completed a program where we were training, young women with basic entrepreneurial enterprise management skills. And what was very key for us is that you need to have that understanding of your financials in your business, and have a clear understanding of what your funding needs are. And what I was spelling out to them is that you may not be able to, from this particular opportunity or this pitch contest, get the full 100,000 or 300,000 that you need for your business. But if you have clearly identified what are your costs or what are the elements that you need funding for, even a smaller grant funding amount can go a long way if you have already actually planned for it. I think, again, it's about taking the little bits and pieces, and each adds on to building your enterprise and to really positioning yourself for success in this industry. And then speaking to, I guess, reaching the right people with the right training at the right time and how crucial that is. Amanda, I'd like to bring you back into the conversation and specifically around engagement with communities, and particularly communities in rural and underserviced areas, because I think those are areas that we can easily forget or tend to forget when thinking about skills development or thinking about training programs. I'd love to just hear from your perspective, how does Green Solar Academy engage with these communities to promote access to solar energy education and training?
Thank you again, Thokozile. I would say that for us as Green Solar Academy, if we're to undertake it alone, it would be a bit difficult because we are a proprietary limited company. However, we're very fortunate that we were called in to be part of a very broad project with SESA and Siemens Stiftung. And SESA is the Smart Energy Solutions for Africa. So what our role was in the whole project was to bring a solution for very rural areas. And we are currently working in the Eastern Cape in Alisdale. It's a very rural area, a small population. And what we are doing there is we developed a containerized solution, basically. We have the solar container there, and it is being powered by, of course, solar system. And we have 4 interns that are there and are assisting the community with different services. We have an internet cafe there, and we also have our e-learning courses. So we also offer like online trainings, and what we did with the e-learning course is that it has 8 chapters, and we made the first chapter of that whole module free so that the people that cannot afford to pay for it are at least able to get that information, understand the basics, and if they're able to eventually work up for it, they'll understand why they want to do it because they already have that information. So that's what we're doing in Alisdale. And we have, it's also an information center. So with the interns there, and it's very bright and green. So sometimes people just walk in out of curiosity to see what it is. And when they walk in there, the interns are ready to share the information. This is the work that we're doing. This is what solar is. This is a free course that you can do so that you can understand further. So as I said initially, as a PTY Ltd alone, it would be quite an undertaking. But with projects like this, and if it has to do with solar and training, which are our passions, then we are able to tailor and customize to what is needed at that time in that area. So that is sort of a summary of our project in Alisdale.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. And really, I get to speak to the fact that engagement at a community level is really so important and so critical for us being able to drive real change. And I'd like us to, from here, then kind of shift to another vital area, which is again around inclusion and empowerment. And Bertha, I'd like to bring you back into the conversation here and understand what specific skills development programs does AWEaP offer to, in fact, empower women and marginalized groups of communities to be able to actively participate in the energy transition, and what has been the impact so far?
Great, thank you so much. So we look at the energy ecosystem in 2 parts. One is we need to prepare a pool of entrepreneurs and professionals that are able to take up emerging opportunities as the energy sector modernizes, as it diversifies, and as there is legal reforms or regulatory reforms that open up the market. So one is building a pool of individual entrepreneurs and professionals that are ready to take up those opportunities. The other is building a competency base within utilities, municipal electricity utilities in South Africa, that will be procuring products, solution systems, and services in the energy space. And so you have this two pools. One is, as they designate market for women, youth, and persons with disability, the market must be available to take on that procurement capacity. So our first skills development program, which we launched in 2012, was focusing on utility professionals. And it was training them on the regulatory framework of South Africa's just energy transition, the policy framework, the global case studies, the global policy framework that signatories to the UN and to the AU are bound to comply with. So we bring in the international perspective. We also bring in the African perspective in terms of Africa needing to utilize all resources available to it for universal access to electricity before it can even consider transitioning. So let's first secure energy provision before we can think of transitioning. So we bring that those aspects. And then we move on to the constructs of value chains. So we break those value chains into detail, where you can differentiate between different suppliers, services, and products, and what is feasible within the South African market in terms of manufacturing, in terms of export and import, and where we are as a country. And these value chain modules are trained or they are packaged for both utility professionals and entrepreneurs. Moving out of that, for utility professionals, we then have a module that focuses on how I can resuscitate socioeconomic development and microeconomies in my jurisdiction using the procurement demand plan within the Just Energy Transition Strategy. And so as they contemplate that, we then move on to the external part and we say, entrepreneurs, do you understand what the policy is for just energy transition and the policy changes, and which markets is it opening up? Are you positioned to participate there? How could you participate? Where are the financial resources that you can tap into to participate? And what is the supportive network that you require? So we bring in industry associations that speak to the value propositions to the markets. And we've got at least over 20 industry associations, right, in South Africa, focusing on different segments of these value chains that a lot of entrepreneurs are not aware of. Some of them are quite small and not as prolific as others. And so the impact that we have had. This year, we are launching our masterclass for entrepreneurs. It's a 3-day masterclass that will focus on those areas that I've already mentioned. And we are launching our second cohort of utility professionals, which is focused on Gauteng. And we focus on all value chains, so renewable and non-renewable value chains, right? In the context of our just energy transition. Hydrogen, green hydrogen, the different types of hydrogen that can be a possibility in our market, the technology that is required, where South Africa is in terms of developing that technology or bringing that technology to the country, and what tangible market opportunities exist. We look at hydro, we look at waste, we look at all renewable and non-renewable, we look at nuclear even, and we break it down. The impact that we are starting to see is that utilities, especially after the president led the inaugural Just Energy Transition conference for municipalities and centralizing the role of municipalities in South Africa's Just Energy Transition, there is a growing demand for building the competencies that are required for municipal electricity utilities to build tailored just energy transitions that are relevant for their jurisdiction and the energy capacity that exists within their jurisdiction, requiring true private-public sector partnerships to support building the capacity within those municipal electricity utilities. And we are looking forward to see how we will succeed with our masterclass for entrepreneurs, which we envision to deliver in all 9 provinces. And this is truly creating an in-depth level of awareness on what is South Africa's just energy transition, what are the entrepreneurial opportunities, and where do I begin as an entrepreneur if I want to enter the market, if I want to expand and diversify, and if I want to grow beyond the South African market to the regional market, where are those opportunities? What we have seen, we've delivered since 2020 32 market orientation webinars attended by over 5,000 delegates from 65 countries. And our website has become a repository of electricity markets. We've showcased over 46 electricity markets on the continent. So for entrepreneurs who were asking, where do I start? If they're invested in their journey as entrepreneurs, they can get a lot of insights and information, and including networks from our website portal, whereas our Just Energy Transition Skills Development is quite nascent in that it's the 2nd chapter of the utility training cohort and the 1st masterclass. And we are looking forward to tracking where those entrepreneurs will end up. The challenge, Togo, that we find is you can convene entrepreneurs and give them the relevant information without the financial resources to enroll them into a cohort that you oversee over a period of time, 12 months, 18 months, to see what are they pursuing in the market post the masterclass. What support do they need in the market? If I refer back to your presentation or your insights, do they understand their finances? What is the status of their finances? Are they ready to participate in the market? What kind of coaching and mentorship can you set up for them to help them in this trajectory of growth and market entry? Right? It is not enough for us to have this short-term courses that almost sensitizes their appetite on what is feasible and what is possible. We need financial resources through partnerships within the ecosystem to say, let's take up cohorts, let's take up 20 entrepreneurs from each province, and let's help them traverse a trajectory of market entry and growth. And let's come back after 18 months and say, with CHIETA, we have supported 20 entrepreneurs to gain entry into the battery energy storage market, or into the electric vehicle market, or into the hydrogen market. These are the challenges that we found. These are the successes we have enjoyed. And as a result, they have diversified into these areas of the service market. Then we will be talking about real impact in the sector. And that requires money, unfortunately, right? It requires program management offices that are dedicated to supporting entrepreneurs in energy, not just a generic entrepreneur support, but in energy with its nuanced requirements.
Thank you so much for that, Bertha, and really amazing work that you've been doing. And I guess it speaks to the fact that, again, we have to start somewhere. But it also speaks to the reality is that this is not all just going to fall into place. We need to be making a concerted effort. There needs to be a clear strategy in terms of how are we going to empower people to be able to participate, whether as entrepreneurs or as part of the workforce. What is the plan that we are going to have in place? And I think the ability to then have in place the appropriate strategies plays such a key role. And Wendy, I'd like to bring you back into the conversation here and just finding out from you, what strategies do you recommend for energy companies to be able to foster a culture of continuous learning and development to keep up with this evolving landscape that we are currently faced with?
I think that's really important. And, you know, we've seen that playing out in real time when many companies had to deal with load shedding. And as a result, they were putting renewables in on their plant. They were having diesel generators running. They were having to implement energy efficiency. And all of a sudden they needed skills, whether it be internally to themselves or externally that they could purchase in, to deal with all of these different issues that they hadn't had to before. And so I think one of the really important strategies is for them to look a little bit longer term and understand, as I was saying earlier, what some of the trends are that are happening. And start thinking, so what if we have to deal with this? What kind of skills do we need? We have found in the skills research that a lot of the response to the energy transition has been short courses, not necessarily new qualifications. So it's important to have a skill strategy that looks at these needs that we're going to have and the timing around it, your existing set of skills that you already have in the organization, and then understand where that upskilling or reskilling needs to take place. And because most of them are short courses, it's been a relatively easy thing to do. We do have to, however, be careful around the quality of some of these short courses and make sure that they are at the level that they would need. And some big companies have also installed their own internal training mechanisms in order to be able to deal with this. And they've used online training because it's really not a huge jump. It's just maybe a new topic that people need to have knowledge on, and not necessarily a whole new, as I was saying earlier, qualification that's required. In some cases, there are qualifications that are required. So the companies would need to look at bursaries for new people coming into new positions that they may have to create, or they could look at upskilling the existing staff. One thing I also just wanted to mention is that we don't talk about very often either, and it comes to the fore when we talk about some of the renewable energy projects, is also looking at the local community and seeing from a sustainability perspective how you can bring them into this transition and learning. So we've seen examples where local communities have been trained, for example, to maintain and operate solar plants. They don't require a lot of maintenance and operation. They're pretty static plants. However, you do need some, and also then maybe using local people for the construction phase, where the majority of the jobs in renewable energy goes into. So looking broader than your own community, but also I would say as part of the skill strategy is making sure that you look up and down your value chain, so that if you have opportunities, for example, to improve efficiency across the value chain and perhaps get carbon credits for that, you can do that. To look broader than your own company is really where we start leveraging the benefit of some of those technologies and scaling them up at the level that we really need in order to address climate change and other issues and energy security and other issues that are facing us. So in summary, it would be look broadly in terms of the skills themselves within your organization. Look at what finance needs to do. Look at what procurement needs to do. Look at your baseline qualifications. Identify where you need new qualifications, where you need just skills or knowledge. And then look at broader than yourself, your communities and also your supply chain, both upstream and downstream.
Thank you very much for that insight and that input, Wendy. Yershen, I'd like to bring you back into the conversation and building on to what you have been sharing in terms of the work that CHIETA does in the sector. How does CHIETA ensure that the skills that are being developed currently align with both current industry needs as well as future technological advancements? Because I think we can't run away from the fact that we are operating in an ever-evolving digital technology. So how does CHIETA then look at this as part of ensuring that alignment, and how can individuals and businesses that are looking to get involved in or support some of these efforts that CHIETA has been working on, how would they then be able to participate?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let me first agree with some of the sentiments shared by Bertha. We've found that to be true in practice with some of our programs. We recently implemented a program with the China-Europe International Business School for about 30 entrepreneurs. And some of the feedback I received, one from a young entrepreneur by the name of Paul Masilo, was that, route to market is a major challenge. And that if you have these type of initiatives, where you are able to address these route to market challenges, both providing the financial support, the mentorship, the non-financial support, the sustainability of our enterprises could be, greatly improved over the long term. So indeed, I fully agree with that. And as Bertha indicated, I think primary issue is it does cost, it's quite expensive to implement some of these programs. But I think what we therefore then need is more collaboration between the public and private sectors. And this is more especially in terms of answering the question that we posed to Priscilla for alignment as well. We've signed a number of collaborative sector agreements with private sector companies to ensure that we train for industry needs. Our collaborative agreements, one, ensure there's sufficient workplaces. Secondly, that there's assessment centers that are in place to meet the skills demand, and that we actually have absorption of learners, where we put in place criteria for at least 50 to 75% of absorption for the programs, whether they be work integrated learning programs, internships, learnerships, etc. And you're quite right, we have to be deliberate and intentional about these things. In another sector, we have a deliberate program for learnerships for people with disabilities, with Aspen, for example, in our pharmaceutical sector. And you currently have about 65 to 70 people with disabilities deliberately and intentionally on that program, which was structured for those particular purposes. But I think to ensure that we do not fall behind the global curve, we need to prioritize innovation as well. For instance, we have established smart skill centers in rural communities across the country. Their main purpose really is to bridge the digital skills divide that we have between urban and rural communities. Stats SA recently indicated that less than 10% of rural households have access to the internet. And so this is quite a problem that is coming increasingly in need of attention. And so to produce enough data analysts, data scientists, and other digital skills for the digital revolution taking place in the energy sector, we've established these smart skill centers. Currently, we have about 6 of them in 6 provinces, all in rural communities. One in Babanango and rural KZN, just opened one in Mojadiskloof in Limpopo. And we're exploring new smart skill centers, 3 more in 3 provinces that are outstanding, with companies such as PG Glass and BP in the near future. And we think that by initiating some of these innovative initiatives, we'll be able to talk more about how to create energy prosperity and less about talking more.
Thank you very much for that, Yershen. Some really great insights that you've shared. And Amanda, I'd like to to bring you back into the conversation, because we've had a lot of focus, obviously, in terms of what are the skills development initiatives that are there, that are available, who are the players in the market that learners or that ordinary South Africans can look to when they're looking to participate in skills development initiatives. But I think what we also need to be cognizant of is that those who are going through these programs, and I think it also ties in with the comment that Bertha's made earlier, and I think what Yershen's also just added on, in that there's a challenge in that we have a skills initiative, or we have a particular program for a set period of time, and following that period of time, that learner then potentially gets lost in the system. That learner then struggles with transitioning then from the training that's being provided in order to then actually, make it practical, whether it is for their business to be successful or transitioning from training to employment. How do you see these challenges possibly being addressed, Amanda?
Thank you, Thokozile. So you are absolutely right. With any transition, I would say there are going to be some challenges. And we have, I think I should also say, privileged that we experienced the challenges that helped us to come up with solutions. So, for example, in Cape Town with our training partner, That Side Life Choices, we developed a Solar Youth Academy. And the idea behind that was to address the skills development for young people, but also to make sure that they don't get lost in the system, as you say, that we don't just train them and then say, all right, you have the skills, thank you. But that we are able to also help them with the transition with at least a foot in the industry. And how we did that was that we used our network to sell them the Solar Youth Academy, to explain that this is the idea, this is what we want to do, and this is the objective, this is what we want to achieve. And we trained these young people in technical skills in solar PV for 8 weeks. And in that, we also realized that it's important for them to get the life and the work skills, because they'll have the technical skills, but they also need to understand how to behave in a workplace, how to work with other people, what is the correct etiquette at a job. So things like that. And also we did like soft skills, like life skills, such as mediation, conflict resolution, because that's also important and would be applicable at work. And then with the program that we developed, they did the training, and then we went to our network, and then we said, these people need to experience how it is to work in a real life situation. Because in training, we are basically simulating what it would be like. So we wanted them to also get quality work experience. So we started with a cohort of 23, and so far 22 have been placed into companies, and they will be doing their internships for 8 months. And then in that 8 months, we also do check-ins with both the learners and the companies to understand from both perspectives, how is that going? Is there anything else that the companies maybe sees that the youth is still lacking? And how is the youth adjusting to the workplace? And then we'll also use that information to see how else we can include things to train them up during the 2 months, or even extend it to 3 months of training if it's needed. So that is how I think that we would be able to overcome that we don't just train them up, because as Yershen said in the beginning, that when we train them up, we're sort of basically contributing to unemployment, because we have all these people that are skilled, that are out there, but they don't have anywhere where they're getting opportunities. So once they have these opportunities to get the practical experience, then there they get ideas. They've sold themselves to the company as well in that period. The company might absorb, they've gotten ideas if they want to branch out on their own. So I feel like that creates better opportunities. And what we also realized was very important when we were working on the program was the recruitment part of it. That when we are recruiting for certain programs, we have to understand and make sure that we recruit the people that have the background that aligns, because it might be a bit difficult if someone doesn't have the necessary technical background, for example, and then I have to try and find them a spot in an EPC where they need someone with a technical background. They're not going to be able to align, and it might cause some friction in that won't be able to find the most conducive place to have this person placed. So those are, I think, some we've experienced those challenges, and I think recruitment and making sure that they have the quality work experience, those are, I think, two of the things that I could say that are important in overcoming those challenges.
Thank you very much for that, Amanda. And I'd like to close us off and perhaps just bring you in, Bertha, just for concluding remarks around this, and really back to this issue or the concern around inclusivity and accessibility for underrepresented groups. And my question then for you and closing question is really, how can we ensure that skills development programs in the energy sector are in fact inclusive and accessible to underrepresented groups, and specifically, again, taking into account, individuals that are from rural areas or disadvantaged backgrounds?
Sure. It's a very difficult undertaking. It's a necessary one. It's not impossible. First off, across the entire globe, we have not come across a dictionary for just energy transition. Let's start there. The definition of basic terms of what just energy transition is, what the just element is, what the transition is about, what the energy element is. Second off is, if we had that as a base, even if it was available in French, in German, or in English, or in Mandarin, we could translate it into our 10 official languages, right? That's making information easily accessible. Number two is sketching the value chains in a graphical format that makes sense, that you can take to communities and workshop where they are at. A lot of the programs we are delivering are in urban areas, right? We have our training courses at our universities. We have our training courses at our hotels that require people to travel. Most of the people who are looking for work cannot afford to travel to those centralized, convenient places. And so we have to we have to synthesize the information into languages that are accessible to everybody. We have to take it to the community. We have to train community leaders who can become advocates of this transition. We're talking about transition. Even if we're just talking about the energy value chains, just understanding the energy value chains. If it wasn't for load shedding, none of us will be having energy conversations around our dinner tables, because we took it for granted that you can switch on and off electricity. Suddenly, with persistent load shedding, everybody became an energy expert. Everybody wanted to understand what is the energy availability factor. Everybody wanted to understand what the stages were, right? So how about we learn from the past 3 years the necessity to take information to the people? Not only will it safeguard very expensive assets that are being invested in the form of renewable energy projects in their communities, but it will ensure that they can use their agency to safeguard the benefit they can accrue from those projects. So it is important that we take information and skills development programs to the people and work with the people to deliver those training programs. We have to go a few tiers down to simplify information so that it's accessible. So that's one. Number two is, do we have a job atlas for persons with disability? Whether it's a collaboration between the Ministry of Health, Department of Education, Basic Education or Higher Learning, and the Ministry of Energy and Electricity, that says, let's take each value chain, let's take categories of disability, and let's match and say, if you have this category of disability, you can easily fulfill this role, and therefore the training that you require is XYZ. That is a very deliberate, very targeted, very intentional way of including people. I said in a number of platforms, why don't we have bid windows for communities, where only community organizations and community members can bid for capacity to develop in their area? Why don't we have bid windows for youth, where only young entrepreneurs would bid, so we can examine the barriers for their participation and have solutions for that? Let's have bid windows for women entrepreneurs, knowing that not every entrepreneur has 25,000 rand to pay for bid documents. Let's be very focused, very deliberate, and be brave as a nation to say we want to lead the charge of inclusivity, therefore we're going to do things differently, right? And then as we open the bid windows, we also examine where the barriers are and we innovate solutions. All right, we innovate solutions that will ensure that those barriers are removed or minimized. And let's see what will happen. Until we get to that point, we are at a place where we're not even talking about South Africans owning energy assets. We are talking about a huge market opening up and being captured by multinational firms with very strong balance sheet. Instead of leveling the playing field so that we don't spend future country revenues correcting the errors that are being made now, let's correct this trajectory so that, as Yershen has said, those revenues can be invested in innovating solutions and owning IP in the country that will be embedded in our value chains and therefore generate revenues and retain revenues in the country instead of expatriating the revenues to other markets because we don't have the intellectual property. So I've said a lot of things, but I'm trying to demonstrate the intersectionality of the challenge. That we have to go to the people, we have to work with the people, we have to build from the ground up, we have to be deliberate in opening the market. Route to market must be mapped out in a sketch that anybody can understand, right? And make that available for marginalized communities and segments of our population. We will be surprised what we will trigger in terms of interest to participate and the scale of participation that we will see. When people can understand, they will innovate. When people are centralized, they will connect, they will innovate. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much for those remarks and really powerful remarks to end this episode on. In essence, going to the point that if we keep a large portion of our population ignorant, or if we are not bringing or we're not making them aware of the opportunities or helping them understand what is actually happening, we're actually going to be missing out on a lot of innovation that can come from those areas, right? It's almost as if we are fighting this battle against energy poverty, but we've got one hand behind our backs because we're refusing to take the time and put in place the necessary initiatives that will bring this hand into the fight, so to speak. So, Wendy, I wanted to bring you back then into the conversation and get your concluding remarks, around, firstly, would we say that, these skills development initiatives that are in place, are we actually meeting the current demand for professionals in the energy sector? And if not, how can skills development initiatives be accelerated to meet this growing demand?
So I think that's quite a complex question to answer. Given that, quantifying the demand is oftentimes quite difficult. But I think we have to look at it from we have to look at the ecosystem, the skills ecosystem, because there are things that government can do, like, for example, regulation around energy efficiency, for example, that then have to be implemented, that then drive that skills, and you have a very clear need for them that is consistent. I think we need to seriously look at our quality of not only tertiary education, but also at school level, basic education. We're finding that a lot of people have to have bridging courses to go into even the basic tertiary education courses and things like that. And then I think also especially for lower level skills, once you're in the workplace, it's really important to have mentors, to have opportunities that business give for people to do their in-service training, and to be mentored through that process so that they come out at the end of it really experienced and understanding what has to be done. I heard a story the other day from a friend of mine who runs a small business in the energy sector, and she said she actually went and learned how to become a PV installer, so that when the people coming out of colleges came to her, she could help them and help train them up to the level that was required. So it's around that quality. We mustn't just tick the box. We need people to be at the right quality, at the right volume that we need in the organization. So building in that flexibility of skills that I was talking about earlier, and recognition of prior learning for those people that have been in the market but are not necessarily qualified. We need those structures that allow us to be able to take those people and reskill them and further skill them into new areas of employment. And then I would say, lastly, in the ecosystem, we need to look at, because those are mostly supply side things, is also then being cognizant of the technology trends and being ready for them when they happen, and be able to retain people. I think we're having a huge brain drain from Africa in general, because the demand for skills like in renewables is global, and people are being offered amazing opportunities and salaries, outside of South Africa and Africa. So how do we retain those people on the continent and make sure that you obviously attracting them to stay in the country? So I think all of those things need to fit together. You really need this ecosystem if you're going to accelerate it. You can't have demand doing all the right things and the supply is not there, or you can't have policy not enabling it. You need to have it all working together in a clear way. And unfortunately, because of the way in which we do skills planning, we often have fragmented approaches. And so that's why you'll see I was one of the co-authors for the Just Energy Transition Implementation Plan Skills chapter. And in there, we propose what we call skills development zones, which make sure that the local TVET college and business and students are all working together, but also a national coordinating body that looks at, let's not take all this donor money and spend it on 5 of the same projects. Let's put it together and make sure that we're really driving the whole ecosystem so that we get the outputs that we need, and that we can then implement some of our energy projects in an efficient and cost-effective way.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much for those invaluable insights, Wendy, and really a great note on which to end today's episode. And I'd like to extend my sincerest gratitude to our guests for again sharing wonderful, invaluable insights around a very critical and a very key area in the South African energy sector. It is quite clear that there's a lot of exciting work that is happening and that is required to happen in skills development in order to ensure that we are preparing entrepreneurs and our workforce for the future of South African energy. If you are interested in learning more about the initiatives that have been mentioned today, or if you'd like to find out how you can support or participate in these programs, please be sure to connect with our guests through their respective organizations. Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration and empowerment. Until next time, let's keep the energy conversation going. Thank you for joining us on the Energy Conversations podcast, powered by Bayaka Infrastructure Partners, an authorized financial services provider, and the African Energy Leadership Center at the Wits Business School. Together, we are committed to empowering communities and fostering meaningful dialogue around the South African energy sector. Remember to subscribe, and let's shape South Africa's energy future together.